Hi again then guys, and welcome to another look at a specific motorbike from the First Ride game. And this is a bike which I was super stoked for back when it first came out because, put simply, the manufacturer who builds this bike had never really done anything like this before. And the company is of course KTM, an Austrian company. I used to often confuse it with Australian, which would kind of make sense given the kind of bikes that they produce. But for those who are maybe unfamiliar with the bike side of KTM's production, because of course they also make cars as well, the Crossbow, they traditionally used to make off-roaders, basically, touring bikes, dirt bikes, more of an adventure kind of vibe. That was their whole shtick. So to make something like this, the RC8, was a radical departure for them, and visually it's a very eye-catching looking machine. It looks similar in some ways to an MV Agusta, with that central mounted headlamp, the fairly simple smooth shapes with the tapering off back end that a lot of bikes came to have, especially in the later 2000s, but then at the same time it's very angular, it's very sharp, very chunky and very aggressive, which in an interesting kind of way actually pays a nice homage to their existing design style, because their adventure bikes have that same kind of angular, sharp, aggressive design, as does the Crossbow, their car. Now in terms of what this bike is capable of in its stock form, or when tuned, as my one is here, as you can see, the number plate's removed, the wing mirrors are removed to lower the weight. In its stock form though, it's pretty good in terms of spec. The power is high, it's got a 1200cc engine, it's a V-twin, and it puts out 175 horsepower, which is pretty good, and a very thumpy 94 pound-feet of torque. Now when you combine that power and torque into a bike that weighs 184 kilos, which is not outstanding, it's certainly not quite as light as something like a Yamaha R1 or some Kawasaki models, but that's not heavy. That's easily better than a lot of its Italian rivals, and consequently the horsepower per kilo, it's not quite 1 horsepower, but it's not far off. It's 0.951 horsepower for every kilo of its weight, which, to put it into car terms, is roughly 950 horsepower per tonne, or the equivalent to it. So that's pretty impressive. I mean, nobody would say that that isn't impressive. Now the bike itself is reasonably priced. It's not insanely expensive. Again, it's not Ducati money, it's not MV Agusta money, but it's not cheap either. It's not as affordable as the aforementioned, say, Kawasaki, Suzuki, Honda, which isn't too surprising. Japan tends to have the monopoly on bang for buck, and this bike is 21,000 credits. That's pretty good. It's certainly cheaper than the track version, which is a huge 85,000 credits, which definitely is in Italian superbike territory, but for 21 grand, I would say that the RC8 is actually a really good deal, because for bigger engine bikes, it doesn't really have the kind of disadvantages which larger engine bikes would usually have. Because if you didn't know anything about the RC8, you would probably assume, looking at it, that it was a 1000. It looks like a 1000cc bike, so the fact that it's another 200cc larger than that is quite surprising. At least it would be if you didn't already know that. Now, to put that into some kind of perspective, if you take a look about a decade earlier at what Kawasaki did with their most iconic, you could say, modern 1200, the ZX-12R Ninja, one of the fastest bikes on the road, let alone from them, that bike is what you'd expect from a 1200. Big, beefy, powerful, but also heavy, not the best thing around corners, certainly not compared to, say, the ZX-10R or a ZX-6R. Whereas the difference with this, because technology moves on so quickly, because bike tech especially does, this bike manages to have that kind of size, power, torque, but without the ridiculously high weight or ridiculously large physical size. Although technically it has the kind of engine that you'd expect from, say, a Super Tourer, or more of a long-distance superbike, you could say, like the 12R is, it's not really that kind of bike when you actually look at it. It's much more of a pure, track-focused superbike, which is kind of what you'd want from that kind of mix. It really is the best of both worlds. You've got that big, lazy power and torque, especially torque, you can certainly feel it in this bike, but at the same time, it's wrapped into this sleek, compact, very smooth, actually, bike experience overall that allows you to not just blast down the straights with the kind of speed that you'd want from a bike like this, and certainly from an engine of this size, but it can actually take corners in a way that would easily worry a lot of the other bikes with that kind of engine size, like Hayabusas, 12R Ninjas, even something newer like the new shape Hayabusa or the ZX14R. They would struggle to have the kind of all-round ability that a bike like this can have. And in some ways you could sort of say that the RC8R is almost a predecessor to the kind of big, powerful Ducatis that we have now. Also, of course, 1200s, but this bike did it a little bit earlier, which is pretty impressive. So I would say that although the RC8R is not one of my absolute favourite bikes, I could certainly understand if somebody did adore it. It's a stunning looking bike for sure, very eye-catching, very unique. But even though I don't adore it, I can certainly see why people would, and I wouldn't fault them for that. It's a great bike, it's a strong all-rounder, and even as far as just in the game goes, it's such a strong bike to go for the over 1000cc category. In fact, there's not much else that can really match it for all-round ability in that kind of engine size. So, with all things considered, 21 grand is actually pretty good value for this bike. It's an outstanding first example of a superbike from a manufacturer who'd never done that before. So, well done KTM, and this is a great example of what they're capable of. So in the game, it's certainly worth a look, and it's one that I don't think you'll be disappointed with. But that's it for this pick overall, of course. I'll see you guys next time, and for now, as always, thanks for watching.